I am Vinnie Tortorich. Folks, your good intentions have been stolen, but don't worry. I'm here to help you get them back. You may be soft and succulent at the beginning of this process, but hang in there. Before long, you will be lean and mean, guaranteed. Yeah, Steven Tyler. Joe Perry. Aerosmith. Dude looks like a lady. Those two men were way the F ahead of their time with that song. Here we are, coming at you early in 2026. It's the Wednesday show. And we're going to bring it, let's just bring him right in right now, the beautiful Mr. Chris Shaffer. Yeah, there he is. Chris and I are coming at you guys. We've already done one show like this. There's going to be somewhere between 8 and 12 of these. We haven't decided how many yet. But every one of these Wednesday shows, you want to keep tuning in because we're going to give you every clue, everything you need to be proficient, I guess is the only word I can use, in fitness. And you're going, wait a minute, Vinny, what have you been telling us all these years? You know, we've given you guys all of these doctors that come on and tell you, oh, cholesterol this, cholesterol that. We put together like the cholesterol collection. You know, we've done all these different things. We've never done a fitness collection. And I wanted it all to be in one spot. So I said, let's do a fitness collection. Now, how's fitness different than weight loss? Easy. Weight loss is weight loss. I've gotten people confined to wheelchairs who cannot move to lose over 100 pounds. They didn't do one sit-up, not one push-up. They didn't get on one treadmill. They didn't run 1 mile because they couldn't. Yet we took 100 pounds off. I'm the guy that started, and now they make memes about this. One of my sayings was, and still is, exercise is a poor way to lose weight. And people have taken me to heart. They've lost millions of pounds by listening to this podcast. And some of them brag about it. Hey, I did nothing. I didn't lift one finger fitness-wise. Now, a lot of them start off that way, and then later on they go, you know what? I've lost 150, 200 pounds. Scott King, my favorite. I always use Scott King as an example. The man just wanted to lose weight. He weighed 600 pounds. He got a couple of 100 pounds off, and he goes, you know what? Why is everyone else having fun on these bicycles? I'd like to go out for a bicycle ride. Looks like everyone else is having fun swimming. I'd like to go for a swim. Look at these jackasses out there running. I think I'd like to go for a run. What's Scott doing now? A little sport called triathlons. And he's not the only one. So what we're going to do over the next several shows, since my degree is actually in exercise from Tulane University, exercise physiology. I think I was the only one that graduated with that degree in my class. Everyone else became a pre-med student. They became either a doctor, a nurse practitioner. My roommate became a physical therapist. They all did important things, not me. I stuck with the fitness stuff and started going down the road of helping people stay fit and lose weight. And these shows are here to help you lose weight. Chris, what do we have on tap for today? What are we going to talk about?
First things first, Vinny, I'm really hoping that intro song was not directed at me. Not that I would take it personally, because I think I'd make a very handsome lady, but either way. Today, in terms of Exercise 101, what we're really focused on is cardio fitness versus lifting weights and strength training, right? And there's two different ways that people can use exercise. And I wanted to dive in a little bit. And I think let's just start at the beginning. What's the difference, and when should somebody look at focusing on their cardio, which you famously in the past have had a cardio New Year's resolution, right? This last year, you had a little bit of a weightlifting resolution.
Right.
And so if somebody's just getting started, do they start with one? Do they start with both? what's the deal?
Well, when you're just getting started, and this is going to sound like a bullshit answer, but when you're just getting started, do whatever you're willing to do. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's going to the gym and doing one set on any machine you can figure out how to use. And when I say a machine, I'm talking about a weightlifting machine. Or if you walk in there and everything looks daunting, but you look at the treadmill and go, wait, they're walking over there. I know how to walk. When you first start, I don't care. Oh, look, there's a stair machine. I know how to go upstairs. I could just do this machine, right? I don't care what you do at the beginning. If you're just getting started, it does not matter. The first thing you have to do, the old saying, journey of 1,000 miles start with one step. I don't care if you step on a treadmill. I don't care if you step on an elliptical machine. I don't care if you go right over to the bench press, the shoulder press, the squat rack, the leg press. I don't care. Walk in and get motivated to do something. Okay? Now, to add to that question, Chris, this is a loaded question. What's the difference between, not what people will say, I just have time to do one. What should I do? Man, what a Sophie's choice, because both are very important. Now, if you're completely sedentary and you're not doing anything, standing up, walking outside, and trying to walk down to the end of the block and back is probably your best bet. You're not even ready for the gym yet. And believe it or not, folks, a lot of folks that I talk to, they're right there. So in effect, you're doing a cardio exercise. You're exercising your cardiovascular system. No, you're not running. You're not going to run a 6-minute mile. You're trying to get to the mailbox at the end of the block and back. If you get up the next day and you decide to try again, try to go 1 or 2 steps further or come up with a new goal. Okay? Just try to get out and start moving. Right? Let's say you're somewhat fit, meaning you take walks every day, maybe with your dog, maybe by yourself, and you walk an hour a day, this kind of thing. Some of you are out there rocking. I get this. Which is more important? Walking, aerobic exercise or anaerobic? Now we're talking about exercising 2 completely different systems. Your aerobic capacity and your anaerobic capacity. Anaerobic is, we're going to call that weightlifting. 2 completely different things. And I'm going to try to explain it. Chris, if I don't explain it in a way that a second grader can understand it, ask me to repeat pieces and parts of it.
Okay.
Aerobic simply means with oxygen, meaning as you're exercising, your body has to use the oxygen you're taking in, the oxygen you're breathing at that time. So in other words, if you go underwater to swim a lap or 2 underwater, and you can make it across the pool, you're holding your breath. The oxygen you're using is already in your bloodstream. It will take a little bit from your lungs because you have a full breath in your lungs. But when you get across that pool and you turn around and try to go back across the pool again, at some point, your brain is going to be screaming to you. You're going to feel like you're locking up, right? You can't go another stroke underwater because you're running out of the oxygen that was in your bloodstream, right? You're exercising without taking in more oxygen. If you try to suck in oxygen underwater, obviously you're going to get a lung full of water, you're going to drown. So you have to come up, catch your breath, breathe in order to do it. So swimming underwater without an underwater subcutaneous breathing apparatus, also known as scuba, if you're swimming underwater holding your breath, that's aerobic exercise. You could do it for a short period. If you run a 100-yard sprint as fast as you can, even though you're sucking every time you pump your arms, all those little short breaths you see Usain Bolt and all these guys doing, it matters zero when they're running 100 yards because the oxygen that's already in their bloodstream is what they're using, right? If you notice at the end of the 100 yards, when they stop running, they start breathing hard. Now their body's trying to catch up to put new oxygen in. If you run further than that, if you start running, let's say you run around the whole track and it takes you a minute, well, now you're going to start using oxygen. If you run fast enough, you're going to get to an oxygen debt. Say a 400 meter. 400 meter is one time around the track. When you get to around the 300 meter mark, it's called having the bear, you get caught by the bear. All of a sudden, your legs get heavy. You feel like you're carrying a bear on your back. It's called being caught. If you watch these runners, they're running their asses off. They have about 75 meters left to go, and they all look like they're, it's like, oh my God, they're not running the same anymore, right? And then someone who was running behind them, reserving their energy, will pass them at the end. So the person who starts off winning, they call it fly and die. You go too hard at the beginning, you run out of oxygen. You see what's happening. Let's say you wanted to continue to run around that track over and over and over again. You can do so, but now it becomes an aerobic activity. Now you're doing aerobics because you're running at a slow enough speed to where the oxygen you're taking in into your lungs go through your alveoli. Your alveoli are in your lungs mixed with the fresh blood that's getting ready to, that goes through your heart. You get the fresh blood in there, and then you're oxygenating. Now you could go on indefinitely. Now other things will slow you down. How much blood sugar do you have? How many ketones do you have? All of these beautiful things. What's your body running on at that point? Well, it's running on oxygen. What else? It also takes energy. Well, it's going to pull from your fat cells. If you have too much sugar in your system, it's going to pull from that, what have you. I don't want to get into that conversation. It gets confusing. Aerobic simply means you're now using oxygen to maintain an activity, being on the stair machine in the gym, rowing, elliptical, indoor bike, outdoor bike, running outdoors, walking, climbing mountains, cutting the grass with a push mower. That's all aerobic activity. Within that, there are zones. We'll get into zones. Chris will ask me about zones before the end of this podcast. That's an aerobic activity. An anaerobic activity is an activity that is done without using oxygen. In other words, let me take that back. You're using the oxygen you've already taken in that's in your blood, but you're doing something so hard, kind of like that 100-yard sprint, that it becomes anaerobic. Weightlifting is anaerobic, just like running a sprint is anaerobic. If you're doing very heavy, I'm going to take something like leg press or squats. When you're doing your 10, 12, 15 reps, you're getting through them. When you get off the machine, now your heart starts pumping and you start breathing hard. Some people, when you squat heavy enough, you might feel like you might black out for a second. It's your body trying to catch up, right? You stand there for a minute, maybe 90 seconds. You get more blood oxygen in because you're breathing hard. Now you could do another anaerobic set. So we look at weightlifting as being an anaerobic exercise. And just because you're wondering and you're not able to ask me a question, if you use light enough weight and you continue past a certain point, yes, weightlifting can be an aerobic activity. That is not the use of weightlifting. And the other question, and Chris is going to ask me this more in detail later. Write it down, Chris. will you get leaner, longer muscles, blah, 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 if you do high reps, low weight versus bulkier muscles doing high weight, low reps. So that's the difference. Cardio is one thing, and that's aerobic. Anaerobic is when you're not using oxygen. That's more like sprinting a short distance or lifting weights. Chris, I'm going to let you start with the question.
So if we say cardio, we're typically talking about something that's an aerobic exercise, like riding your bike, running, swimming, walking, depending on how fast you're doing that, all of those kinds of things. If we're talking about lifting, we're talking about the anaerobic side of things, which is something more like a sprint or lifting, doing push-ups, any of those kinds of things. What's the difference in terms of the body? You said it works two different systems.
Right.
Is there a difference in the systems it's working in your body? And
well, yeah,
are there different benefits to both, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, there is. So as far as the endocrine system, you're taxing your endocrine system. And when you do aerobics, it's funny because you build up mitochondria in both and you build up capillaries in both. But the way your body, your heart, you can build up your heart with both. But the way your body utilizes those systems, it becomes vastly different. So, as if I'm going to take the dumbest thing, if you want to run a marathon, 26.2 miles, I'm going to have you go out and run a bunch. Do a lot of aerobics so that your body, it can build up the capillaries and the mitochondria in the muscles that you're going to use to be used in an endurance way, right? And it's going to have your heart build a certain way so that your body could get used to being in a certain zone for long periods of time versus, I'm not going to have you do heavy squats if you want to run a marathon. If you want to win a bodybuilding competition or a weightlifting competition, I'm not going to have you go out and run, right? I want you to build that mitochondria. I want you to build those capillaries. I want you to build everything. I want your system to be built differently, right? And anyone can build the system. Now, some people are more prone to be better at one thing than the other. Some people have more slow twitch muscle and they'll be better at one thing. Other people will be better at, fast twitch things, and you'll see them in that. If you look at who wins marathons, they all seem to come from Ethiopia, Kenya, or Mexico. Prove me wrong, right? The best runners in the world is the ones that we're trying to get under a 2-hour marathon, the ones that win everything, win the big prize money. So what they found was a lot of these people have more slow twitch muscle. Their bodies adapt to these type of sports better, right? We see it in cycling. People from certain backgrounds, certain parts of Europe do better in slow twitch muscle sports like cycling and what have you than anyone else. You look at American football, everything is short and sweet and fast, all anaerobic. These guys are sprinting for like a few seconds, right? And then they go back to the huddle. You see them. The games are cold right now. You see them in between plays breathing very hard. They're catching their breath to do another anaerobic thing. They have a lot of fast twitch muscles, right? They will never win a marathon, but those guys can run from A to B really effing fast. Boxers are known for their fast twitch muscle, right? They can throw a punch so fast you won't even see it coming, right? It's just nuts. So that's the difference between fast twitch muscle and slow twitch muscle and how it works. It doesn't mean that if you have a lot of fast twitch muscle that you couldn't be a good runner, that you couldn't do triathlons. It doesn't mean that if you have a lot of slow twitch muscle, you couldn't be good at football. Hell, I played football on a D1 scholarship, and I'm really good at slow twitch muscle sports. I'm one of those guys that happen to be right in between. I just had to develop one engine for one sport. And when I was done with that sport after college, I wanted to try something else. And it turns out I was pretty damn good at that, right? The truth of the matter is, if someone would have got me into bicycle track racing, in the velodrome where they look like they're going around a big wooden barrel on the inside, that would have probably had been my best sport when you think about it, when you put two and two together, because I do have good endurance from the aerobic side of it, and I do have incredible power. I'm one of those athletes in the middle that could go either way, right?
So if we're talking about cardio, it's more stamina, endurance. If we're talking about strength training, it's really power and obviously muscle building.
Right. Correct.
So
Right.
if we take that first piece of advice that you gave, which is just do, if you're just getting started, do whichever one seems less scary. And we say, okay, somebody that's been to the gym a couple times, is there a balance that people should be looking for? Or is it pick one and really establish a routine, whether it's getting up every morning and running like David Goggins or going to the gym and lifting a couple days a week? Should people be looking for a balance there to start, or should they pick one and really develop a routine around whatever it is? Cardio.
Well, let's use my brother Mark, who came to me. Now, Mark played high school football. He was one of those blue chip All-American types and the whole thing. Never really weightlifted or anything. He was kind of a lazy athlete that just happened to be really good. It's really annoying because I have to work at everything. And he was that guy, right? But then after football, he basically decided, I don't really like working out or sports or anything else. But boy, do I really like pizza and donuts and fried Cajun food. And next thing you know, he's got no muscle tone. He weighs 350 pounds. And cut to, 35 years later, he's now 55, 56. He's trying to walk upstairs with his 1-year-old granddaughter in his hands, and he's got to stop to take a knee. And that's literally what happened to him. He was like, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to see my granddaughter get old. I won't watch her grow up. And he walked into a gym. He just walked into a gym. It was the gym that I kept telling him, it's the gym I use when I go to visit him. And I kept saying, Mark, it's a great gym. It's part of the wellness program. It's next to the hospital. They have everything. They even have an indoor track because it gets so hot down there in southern Louisiana, And he was like, yeah, I'm never going to do that. But he walked in there and he said, please charge me for a membership. His wife tried to get him to walk out. He called his wife while he was standing there, and she said, Mark, walk out. Maybe we could get a special or a deal at Christmas, a 2-for-1, bop. And Mark said no. He had a moment of clarity. And his wife says, I can't believe you wouldn't wait until, he said, honey, if I walked out of there, I wouldn't have ever walked back in. That was the first good move he made. He got the membership. He didn't wait for a deal or a 3-month for free or get a bap. He just got the membership. Very important here, folks. The next thing that Mark did was he called me and he said, I got a membership. Tell me what to do. I told him, I said, Mark, I tried to get you to get on your spinner because I made him buy a spinner. He brought it home. It became a clothes hanger. And whenever I'd go down there, I would get him on the spinner. I said, when was the last time you were on the spinner? And he said, the last time you were here. And I said, what did we get you up to? And he goes, 10 minutes, right? He was so out of shape on the spinner that sitting on it hurt his crotch, right? It was just uncomfortable. I said, okay, when you go to your gym tonight after work, do you think you could do 5 minutes on the spinner? He said, yeah, I think I can. I said, okay, do 5. If you can do 10, do 10. Okay? He goes, good. I said, okay, the next thing I want you to do is I'm going to send you a text with some very basic stuff. It's all on machines. I know all the machines in there because I've been in that gym a bunch of times, right? So I said, Mark, I'm going to just have you do one set of 10 reps with no weight on the bench press, the shoulder press, the lat pull machine, the lat rowing machine, one set of 10 of everything with the lightest weight. Just put the pen, there's a pen, put it on the first hole. I don't care if the hole says 10 pounds or 10, the number 10, whatever it is, I just want you to move. I had him do a leg press with almost no weight. I had him do leg extensions and leg curls and calf raises and walk out. I just gave you his whole workout. You want me to say it again?
Yeah.
Bench press, shoulder press. So he pressed 2 things. Lat pull downs, rowing towards himself, all machines. And then I set it back because I had him do leg extensions to get some synovial fluid in his knees, leg curls, and then leg press and calf raises on the same leg press machine because I knew which one they had. And I knew you could do that. All of that took him an additional 15 minutes. He was in there for a total of about 25 minutes. And he said, what if I can't figure out which exercises to do? I said, your buddy Jimmy Rome goes there, right? He goes, yeah, but Jimmy talks a lot. I said, tell Jimmy to shut his mouth and help you, show you where the machines are. If Jimmy is not there, they'll have a trainer milling around the floor or just ask anyone. And that's what he did. He got through it. And he called me and he goes, that was pretty easy. I don't feel like I did anything. I said, we're fine. We're good. And I said, you're not going to go back tomorrow. You're going to feel sore. He goes, Vinnie, I'm telling you, I'm not going to feel sore. I said, you will get delayed onset muscle soreness, or as the kids call it, DOMS, tomorrow afternoon, which he did. I had him go back a day later, not the next day, but the next day. I had him go every other day, even though he said he only wanted to do 3 days a week. I had him do that 6 times, every other day. And then after he went 6 times, then I said, are there places where you think now you're familiar with the machines? Can you add maybe to another hole with a pin? And there were places where he was able to, like the leg press, he was able to do more. Hell, he's carrying over 300 pounds. His legs can press more than that. He had trouble with shoulder press. He was able to pull more. So we started messing around with that. You see, you got to start somewhere. Meanwhile, he told me that he was up to 15 minutes on the bike and then 20. So where Mark is now is 30 minutes on the bike and then 30 minutes of working out. He's still doing 1 set to failure on some, not to failure, but 1 set, but he's adding more weight. He's not going to failure. And we added in curls and triceps. So we added in 2, but his goal is to go only 3 days a week, and he must be in and out in 1 hour. That's his only goal. And guess what? He's sticking to it. But we baby stepped him into it. So what is he doing? He's doing cardio and he's doing the workout. Now, will that have to change at some point? Yes. But man, this is the first time I got this guy in the gym in 35 years. I don't want to scare him with new stuff. And by the way, when I was there for Thanksgiving, I went through with him and I got him rocking and rolling. Yeah, I saw where, let's try this, let's try that. But it's the same exercises. We added some weight. I got him in some different positions on the seat and what have you. He's really coming around. And that's what we're talking about here. Maybe he's, at one point, he said that he was thinking about buying a bicycle because he likes, maybe riding outside, maybe in the spring. So he's talking about he's already thinking about riding a bicycle because he's enjoying the machine, the spinner. I think he tried an elliptical one day and didn't really like it, but it's okay, right? You don't have to like anything. You just have to do it. He's building cardio and strength right now. And boy, his strength is pretty bad. It's pretty bad.
So is that where most people should focus? If we get beyond the I'm 500 pounds and can't make it to the mailbox stage, right? Because if we're at
Right.
that stage, we're basically saying, let's get to the mailbox. Let's start with
Right.
just walking. If we get beyond that, is that what you're suggesting for most people who would be beginners, is to add in a little bit of cardio and a little bit of strength to
Yeah.
get both systems working?
And that can work for 5 or 6 months, right? And we actually, one of the programs that we're putting together that's going to be out there by the time these shows come out, the one set to failure, but you don't have to go to failure on those, right? And we should write that in the text, Chris. Write that down because we're going to hand these people the text also. If you're not there, you don't have to go there, right? You don't have to overwork yourself. We need to write a whole thing about that goes with it to let people know you have to start where you are. We give the whole thing for people who are already doing a routine that wants to just keep going, but you can use these same workouts at a much lower level. I need to do that in my preamble on all 3 of the workouts, that people have to start where they are. Make sure that when I record that I add that in.
I got you.
Okay. Because there's no one size fits all. Now, let's say down the road, you're doing that for several months and you start liking, you might not start on a bike. You might start on a treadmill, right? And you might notice that you like the treadmill. A lot of people, they get into an aerobic thing. And if like, for me, it's like a massage. Like whenever I have like something weighing heavy on my mind or whatever, I'll go outside and go for a run. I'll go for a skate. I'll go rowing. I'll do some of that in the house. I'll just clear my mind by doing aerobics. The late, great Bill Walton, famous basketball player, told me once, he goes, I go on these 4 and 5 hour bike rides and I solve all the problems of the world. And then I come home and I rush in and I tell my wife, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and she'll say, slow down, Bill. I wasn't privy to that 5 hour conversation you just had with yourself. Right. And I started laughing when he told me that because I've been guilty of that my entire, bike riding career. Right. I was doing ultras before we bragged about ultras. As a matter of fact, it was almost embarrassing to tell people what you were doing. Now people, take a solid bowel movement and they're telling you, it's got to be on Instagram. I just took a shit. You guys should see this, right? And everyone's doing that. Look how great I am. I just, it's the humble brag. Look what I just did, right? I came from a day of, I was doing ultras, and when people would say, how far did you ride that bike? I would lie and say 70 or 75 miles, even though I might have ridden 200 or 300 miles that day. And a friend of mine asked me once, why do you always lie about that? And I said, because the person who's asking knows I ride the bike for long distances. And to the average person, they can wrap their head around 70 miles, right? If you start mentioning 200 and 300 miles, they're going to zone out, or they're going to ask you, where do you go to the bathroom? Like they can't wrap.
Tank of gas
right.
in most cars is about 300 miles. Right?
Pretty much. Yeah.
Somewhere between three and 4, depending on how much gas mileage or how good your gas mileage is.
Right.
And that's a solid 7 hours of driving in a lot of cases. So it's
yeah, easily. I fill up 3 times on the way to Louisiana in a car that gets bad gas mileage, and I get about 350 miles on it before I have to fill up. Right. So, yeah. And to think about that, you would spend that kind of time. So I never wanted to have the discussion because it makes you sound crazy. Right. So you might get into cardio. That might become your thing, but it doesn't mean that you should put strength training aside altogether. When I got out of cycling, I found myself, not doing enough cardio. So I started making a New Year's resolution to do at least 365 hours of cardio per year. And no, I did not do an hour a day. Some days I did nothing. I just went to the gym and pumped iron. That was it. But on a Saturday, if I got on my bike for 3 hours, that covered, 3 days in that week. And on Sunday, if I went for a 3 hour hike with my wife. That covered another 3 hours. So I could get 6 hours right there on the weekend, right? Go on, Chris.
I think that's an important distinction we need to make. If you're just getting started, walking can be cardio, it can be an aerobic exercise. But for most people, walking at a standard pace is not what you are calling cardio, right? You just mentioned a hike. You're walking while you're doing your phone calls. You're not counting that as cardio.
No,
right?
when I walk on my phone calls, I do not count that as cardio. Now, if someone is way out of shape, that could be their cardio. I have to be in zone 2 for at least
what is zone 2?
Zone 2 is between 70 and 80% of your aerobic capacity. We'll get into that later on in the same program. But I would have to be in zone 2 for a portion of the time. So let's say we went on a 3-hour hike, right? Well, if you're in the mountains, more than close to 2 hours of it is going to be uphill because you're slower going uphill and you're going to be in zone 2. And if I'm carrying a rucksack, I'm going to be at the upper limit of zone 2, trying to stay out of zone 3. That last hour, you're coming downhill and you're walking fast and halfway jogging, and you get down in about an hour. So that whole workout counts as, 3 hours of aerobics, right? So that's a walking thing. Now, when I'm talking on the phone and walking around the neighborhood, I can't walk at a pace that's going to put me out of breath because it's going to be annoying I have meetings with you all the time when I'm walking. The only reason I'm doing that is because, as they say, sitting has become the new cigarettes, right? It's the new smoking. I want to get out and move. I don't want to sit at this desk and have all of my hip flexors tighten up and have my body fall apart because I'm now a businessman. So I like to get out and move while I'm talking. It means I have to carry a notepad a lot of times and write notes. Or if I'm on the phone with Chris, he'll tell you, I'll just say, Chris, write this down for me. Right.
In case no one noticed that it's happened twice during this conversation, right?
Right. Yeah, I'm the only person I know that has 3 assistants. And Chris is not even considered an assistant. It's generally Debbie and Leona. But if Chris is on the phone and I'm walking, he'll start hearing, write this down, right? So that happens. This is not about me, it's about you, but that's cardio. Some people get more into strength training and they'll start enjoying the gains, right? At first, you don't really see your body changing that much, but you feel yourself getting stronger. And nothing, it's intoxicating. It's an intoxicating feeling, right? To start feeling stronger. And before I get into that, I have to tell you guys, Jasper, I'm going to go through this really fast. Jasper, it's an air scrubber, folks. You put it right there in your home. I can tell you, we have 2 of them in our house now. My wife does not snore anymore. And the guy who started the company, Mike Feldstein, told me, he goes, it will stop snoring. I thought it was BS. I cannot say it's going to stop snoring for you, but my wife does not snore. As a matter of fact, I heard her do a light snore the other night for the first time in 3 weeks, right? I must say she barely ever snores anymore. She used to snore all the time. Jasper is an air scrubber. It cleans the air. Why not have the freshest air in the world going into your lungs? Jasper, spelled Jaspr. There's no E in there. jaspr.co/Vinnie will save you $400 on your Jasper. Jasper.co/Vinnie, $400 off. There's no other deal that good on the Jasper site. Go there right now. Get your unit. Let them know we sent you. Jasper.co/Vinnie. Or Vinnie at checkout. Vinnie, no wimpy Y. Anyway, Chris, the first thing people will feel before they when you start lifting weights, the first thing you're going to feel is that delayed onset muscle soreness. Let me go back to that. What happens after a while, you won't feel that anymore, and people start thinking, oh, I'm not working out hard enough anymore because I'm not getting sore anymore. that's not a feeling that you want to continue. Now, the day after a workout, let's say you do like a really hard chest day, you're going to feel some tightness in your chest and in your triceps and in your shoulders and what have you. But you're not going to feel that crazy soreness all the time. That's going to go away. The idea is you want to start feeling strong. So the second thing you're going to start feeling is stronger. Okay. You're going to notice instead of lifting, one plate on the machine or 2 plates, you might be at 3 plates or 4 plates. Right? So if you're doing 10 reps with 1 plate and then, a month or 2 later, you're using 4 plates, you're now doing 4 times the amount of weight. Under the definition of work, let me explain what this means. If you lift over your head, one dumbbell, if you lift over your head and back down to your shoulders, one 10-pound dumbbell 10 times, under the laws of work, you have now effectively lifted 100 pounds. Okay? You lifted 10 pounds 10 times. That's 100 pounds of weight that you moved. Months later, if you're lifting 40 pounds over your head like that, which is a lot of weight, let's just say 20 pounds. Okay, a month later, you're lifting 20 pounds over your head like that. 10 times, you've effectively moved 200 pounds. So you're getting stronger. You're going to feel the strength before you start seeing the muscles. If you feel underneath your fat or whatever you have on your body, because we all have a little layer of fat, you might start feeling your pecs coming in, your shoulders coming in. That's usually when people get motivated to continue on. But that doesn't happen overnight. The third thing you will see is the best scale in the world, the mirror. You'll start noticing in the mirrors, oh my, I'm starting to get some biceps here. Oh, look at that. My shoulders are popping out a bit, right? That's what comes from weightlifting. From cardio, you'll notice that you'll be able to go on a walk or a jog or whatever, and you'll be able to jog and have a conversation after a while. Once you get into it with doing weightlifting, you will notice that you're getting stronger. Even if you do like static moves, like people do like planks, right? Planks were a big thing about 10 years ago. Everybody's doing a plank. At first, you might not be able to hold yourself in a plank for 30 seconds. Then before you know it, you could do it for a minute, and then a minute and a half, and 2 minutes, and 3 minutes. And hell, I've had the guy on the show that had the world record with planks, and it was a couple of hours, just holding a plank. So you could train your body anaerobically to do superhuman things. You just have to want to continue to do the boring ass exercises. Chris, next question. Any other questions?
So you just mentioned a few things. You mentioned you see some results right away from weightlifting, both good and bad, right? The first time you go into the gym, you're going to feel like you got hit by a truck. That's just going to happen. That goes away. The second thing you notice is the strength benefits. With cardio, because you're literally lifting more weight and it's a visible indicator. With cardio, is there a way to know that you're doing it right? Like, do you get any of those early indicators with cardio?
Yeah, at first look, if you go jogging or walking, you haven't walked, you've been a couch potato or whatever, you get on a treadmill for even 10 minutes. The next day, your calves are going to be super sore. Maybe your hips will be sore. Your lower back might be sore. Wherever the weakest links are, you're going to feel some soreness. And you may, like my brother Mark, like 5 minutes or so that first night. I think maybe he went 10 minutes by the hardest. Before, a couple of days later, he was like, hey, I made it to 15 minutes, right? That's pretty quick after like 3 or 4 workouts. And then after several more workouts, he goes, hey, I did 20 minutes. And before I knew it, he was at 30 minutes, right? That was after like a month. And I said, well, are you going to continue on with that? He says, no, it's very boring to me. So 30 minutes is about what I can do before I get super bored. And he goes, I like the, going from that to the weightlifting. As a matter of fact, I talked about this in my book, Fitness Confidential. One of the things you can do is what I call the aerobic smorgasbord. I mean, there's so many different pieces of equipment in a gym. If you get bored on one piece of equipment, let's say you wanted to do 30 minutes, right? You could do 10 on the bike, 10 on the Stairmaster, 10 on the rowing machine. Before you get bored with each one of those, you're moving to something else and you're working more muscles. So it's kind of a cool thing, right? So that's where you want to be. Why did my screen get small, Chris?
That I don't know. What do you mean it got small?
My whole screen got small. It was big and now it's small. Let's see. Does it look, did everything go down small to you? Or is it still the same thing?
I think it's just on your side.
Huh. I don't know what happened there. Huh.
We talked a little bit about zones. I don't know if you want to get into that right now. So, because weightlifting, if you're moving weight, you're doing it right to some extent, right? With cardio, if you're not getting to where you can't necessarily have a conversation coherently, you're not getting all of the benefits out of it, right? Getting up and walking when you're starting and just walking at a slow, steady pace is a great place to start. But if you're trying to get the benefits of cardio, you have to do a little bit more than that. So do you want to dive into the different zones and how you know where you are so that you're getting the benefits of that a little bit?
Yeah. So, there are basically 5 zones, but there's only 4 zones that you should worry about. So zone 1, and I'm going to give examples of all 4 zones. Zone 1 is between resting heart rate and 69% of your aerobic capacity. Zone 1 can be things like just walking your dog, where you're just up and walking and moving, and depending on your fitness level, right? Just moving around, folding laundry, making your bed, doing yard work, this kind of thing. That's all zone 1. You're not breathing hard, you're up and you're moving. Zone 2 is between 70 and 79% of your aerobic capacity. Oh, by the way, in zone 1, you only burn fat for fuel. Your body is keeping your blood sugar level normal. You can burn, just like with your basal metabolic rate, which is your resting rate. Like if you're sitting all day long, the number of calories it takes just to run your body, right? That's called your BMR, your basal metabolic rate. Now, in zone 1, you're just burning fat. Zone 2, just like zone 1, you're still just burning fat. Your body is converting fat into a butyrate into a ketone and it's burning it, whether you're in ketosis or not. That's what happens, right? Your body just uses fat as fuel. In zone 2, you're now at an elevated pace. You're between 70 and 79% of your aerobic capacity. Zone 3, now you're getting up there, right? I didn't give examples of zone 2. You're able to run with your mouth closed unless you have a really bad deviated septum. You're able to maybe get on a spinner or a rowing machine. And I'll give the numbers in a second, right? That's zone 2. You're able to talk while you're doing aerobic activity. You got to breathe a little harder, but you're not out of breath. Zone 3 is between 80 and 89% of your aerobic capacity. And I can tell you, when you're getting up to the top of zone 3, it's hard to have get a whole sentence out, right? It would be like, hey, Chris, we're going to run to the next thing, and then we're going to stop. That's zone 3, right? You're now working at a higher capacity. Your body cannot keep up with just turning fat into butyrates anymore. You now have to burn some of your blood glycogen in order to keep up. And you have a fairly good amount of blood glycogen. If you start to get too low on that, you will do what's called bonking. Your brain will shut off your ability to use sugar and try to shut you down because you're doing something stupid. right? You're not taking in any calories to combat what you're doing, but that takes a long time in zone 3. Zone 4 is between 90 and 100% of your aerobic capacity. When you're at about 95%, there's no chit chat going on. Your mouth is hung open. You're trying to get as much oxygen in as possible. You don't seem to ever being able to catch up. Remember, we talked about running that 400 meters. When you get towards the end of that, you're gasping. You're trying to get oxygen in. It's not keeping up. You can hang on to that for a very short period of time before you have to drop back into zone 3 and or zone 2. Period. If you're on a rowing machine doing a 2K, that takes about 8 minutes. You ride right around the middle of zone 4 if you're trying to get a time on that, right? You're trying to get a fast time. And in order to, finish up and you go all the way to 100%, I've seen people, when they finish that, they literally fall off of the rowing machine. That's how bad it hurts to stay right in the middle of that and then get right to the top in the last 500 meters. You can't control your body, right? Some people actually pee their pants and all kinds of stuff. Zone 5, I mentioned all 5 zones. It's beyond zone. Very well-trained athletes. I was there at one point. I'm not there now. People like Lance Armstrong was there at one point, where you can eke in past 100% for a very short period, but you can't do it for very long. It's a few seconds, and then you got to come down. It's kind of like that peak we were talking about on the rowing machine. You can only stay there for a short period. There are different ways to figure out your zones. If you use any of the smart devices, a smartwatch, a Garmin, what have you, they have some systems where they figure it out. Usually those are wrong. They have a very low, because none of those companies want to get sued. So they have them skew way on the low end, right? For every age group. Like they'll say, put in your height, your age, your weight, your and then they'll give you a number. And all of those numbers skew very low. I know this because I've been looking at these for years. My buddy Phil Maffetone came up with a pretty good system where you take empirical data. So we're going to do Chris. We're going to do Chris's age. So Maffetone says you take the number 180 minus your age. So Chris, how old are you?
I am 37.
Okay. So you take 180 minus 37. What do you come up with?
143.
Okay. 143. But you're not a couch potato. You work out all the time, right? So we're going to give you 5 more. So 143 plus 5 is 148. By the way, if you were a couch potato, we would take 43 minus 5 and put you at 138. Okay? But you're going to so now you're 148. According to the math method, that number represents 75% of your aerobic capacity. So you could go a little above that. What did we say? 148 is where you were?
148. And what is that, Vinnie? Beats per minute?
Beats per minute. Thank you. So that's 148 beats per minute to keep you right in the middle of zone 2. If you go to 150 or 151, now you're getting to that 79% of your aerobic capacity. That's kind of the top. So your range is between about 142 and 152. That's your zone 2 range, right? Now, if you went and had a stress test done and they know exactly where your heart rate will go, let's say your heart rate goes way higher than 180, it goes to 192 or something. Now you can calculate percentage off of that number. Does that make sense?
Do you still do minus the age? So I get a stress test and...
No. All right. Let's say you got a stress test. You got a calculator there?
Yeah.
All right. Pull out a calculator. let's say you got a stress test and they said, Chris, right now your heart rate goes to 195. Okay. What's 75% of 195?
146 and a quarter.
Okay.
So 146.
146. And what did we say your math method was? It was between 148 and 151. And I gave you that 142 to 151, and you were at 146. You see,
Yeah, so it gets you close enough without having to die on a treadmill.
Right. So, and by the way, if you know how to do a test at home, I tell people to always go get a real stress test, because if you try to fly and die at home and you have any kind of cardiac problem, you can have a cardiac event and there's no one there to save your ass. So if you're out of shape, it's better to go get, a stress test done. By the way, before you start any workout program, you should go and get a stress test done. That's just prudent. So did that answer the question of the different zones?
It did. So if we're looking at something like weightlifting, it's start as low as possible and work your way up. If we're focusing a little more on cardio, it's really shoot for zone 2, and everybody can do the math method for themselves. Vinny, we know everybody has fitness trackers. That's a decent way, at least, to know where you are. But
Absolutely.
If you're going to a gym, every piece of cardio equipment has some sort of a heart rate tracker. It's either built into the handles or it's a clip-on. Use it, and you'll know where you are. And that way you can control where you are.
I'll tell you another dirty little secret. Most of the mechanisms in those machines at the gym were put in there by the Polar company, Polar. They were the first ones with the devices back in the 80s. And if you just get a strap, and usually a gym will have a strap, right? You could do the handheld things, which is kind of annoying, and it works just fine. But you can get a strap and put it around your chest, right around your rib cage. And I have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 Polar devices over the years, and all the watches are broken. I keep the straps, and I just buy the low device and just, just keep changing the battery in that strap, and they last for years. They go forever and ever. And if you want to buy, like Garmin and all these different companies, the wristwatch that you have on your arm now, it does the same sort of thing, right? So there's a ton of ways to know what your heart rate is at all times, with all these fitness trackers and everything else. So you can do that. Chris, did we cover it, or did I leave anything out, the difference between cardio and weightlifting?
I think we covered it. I have a couple myths that I want to bust about both before we let everybody get on with the rest of their day.
Sure.
Vinny, you mentioned at the top of the show, exercise is a poor way to lose weight.
Mm-hmm.
Doing as much cardio as possible. Everybody thinks that's a great thing for weight loss. I don't think we need to dive much more into that. We already knocked that one out. You shouldn't be doing cardio or weightlifting for weight loss. You should be eating correctly.
Let me add this. If you're eating correctly, if you're cutting down on sugars and grains, and you're cutting out processed foods altogether, anything that comes in a package, and you're eating one ingredient, real food, exercise will magnify weight loss. Well, lean muscle mass. Let me just put it that way. And so it's up to you, right? I just want to clarify that. If you're eating right and doing exercise, now it's a double whammy. So that's a good thing.
All right. Myth number 2, more is better. So more cardio means you're going to start to see results faster, whether it's body recomposition or the increase in stamina. Is that true, or should people be focused on a certain number of days a week like most people do for lifting?
There's a thing that's going around the internet now. There's an 18-year-old girl. She's a Class A runner. She's at one of the maybe Oregon State or one of those. She's 18 years old, and she just set the new 5K record. She ran each mile in like 4 minutes and 45 seconds or some crazy amount of time. And they asked her what she did differently to get there. She said she ate more, rested more, and had more rest days. More is not better. I see it in the ultra. I'm still in the ultra community because they all buy my ultra salt. You know that. The dirty little secret in ultras is no matter who they're advertising, they're using ultra salt. So I'm talking to these people all the time. And they know in that community that they can get into this exercising too much, never doing weightlifting, especially the runners. And they all find that when they take a break and do less running and start adding anaerobic activity back in and getting more rest, they get stronger and faster. Bottom line. So the myth is more is better is not really true. As a matter of fact, people always thought, when I was at the top of that rung in ultra cycling for a lot of years before the internet came along, and now everybody's a hero. And people just thought that I was like Forrest Gump, right? I just never stopped riding a bike. On Monday, I would never ride a bike during the season. I would do aerobic, I would do gym, weightlifting, or I would do some other kind of active recovery, like go to a yoga class or just do yoga myself or what have you. But the one thing I would not do is put a bike seat between my legs. On Tuesday, I was either on the spinner or out on the road for about 90 minutes. On Wednesday, I was either on the spinner or out on the road for about 3 hours. On Thursday, I was on the spinner or out on the road for 90 minutes. Think about that. During the week, I was on the bike for about 6 hours total, right? I took Monday and Friday off. Friday was active recovery again. And then Saturday was my long day. Early in the season, a long day might be 100 miles. Later in the season, a long day might be 300 miles. And then we had, I did what was called crackback weeks. You can't do 300 miles week after week after week. It's nuts. So if I did 300 miles one Saturday, the next Saturday, I'd drop it down to 150, right? I would come back on Sunday with a strong ride. If I did 300 on Saturday, I would come back on Sunday with a weak ride, maybe 50 to 75 miles, right? And then took Monday off again. You didn't ride as much as people thought you did, right? You got to give your body time to absorb what you're doing, whether it's weightlifting or aerobics. Your body needs to absorb what you're doing.
So if people are getting into zone 2 and they're doing cardio the right way, for lack of a better term, what should people shoot for in terms of time doing cardio or number of days a week? Is there a number?
If you could get it up to as high as 4 or 5 hours a week, that's about as far as you want to go. Unless you're training for a marathon or you want to do a 100-mile long age ride or something that comes along, right? If you have a different activity, then you kick it up for that time frame. I'll give an example of this year, where this year the goal was not to do 365 hours of aerobics. It was to do maybe even half of that. Although I got, I got to like, I think 270 hours or something, right? But last year I was over 420 hours. So I did really, in effect, kind of cut it in half. I didn't really crank up high aerobics until a month, maybe 5 weeks before I went off and did Mount Whitney again, right? And then that was sport specific. I threw on the ruck pack and I got up into the, the Shenandoahs here. I got up into the mountains and started walking uphill a lot. So I really increased my aerobics for about 5, maybe 6 weeks, but probably 5 weeks. And it looked like the good old days. That's what got me to 270 hours, right? I did within 1 month, instead of doing 30, I probably did 45 hours in that first 30 days. And then I did another 2 weeks of that, maybe another week of that. So something was coming up where I had to crank it up again. So if you get up to 3-4 hours a week, that's a lot, especially if you want to do weightlifting. It might be 2.5 or 3 hours a week, right? You might count your walking as your aerobics, right? I don't, because I'm walking at a slow enough pace, usually with my dog, and I'm talking to people on the telephone. So it depends on what you're doing. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think having that cap at 4 to 5 hours makes a lot of sense for people. And it's a good
Right.
way to make sure that you're getting enough in, that you're getting all of the benefits, but you also still have time to get the weightlifting, especially if you're setting that limit like Mark is. I want to get into and out of the gym in a strength session in a half an hour or in an hour. Then you're talking an hour a day, right? Between
Right.
cardio and
And
weightlifting. And your life is not the gym at that point.
that's correct. And I think even though he says he was committing to 3 days a week, and that's still his commitment, he's been going 4 because that's the way it works out. He said, I just go every other day. It's become this habit. He goes, I'm looking forward to it. And, but he's just committed to 3 a week. And most weeks, for a man that hates doing exercise, he's been going Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Monday, so it turns out to be, 3.5 or 4 workouts per week. So there you have it. Chris, what are we going to talk about next week? What's coming up next week?
Next week is focused more on weightlifting. So we're going to talk about reps and sets and all the ins and outs of what that actually means when you get into the gym.
Yeah. So we're going to just concentrate on the gym next week. So folks, tune in next Wednesday where I come back with Chris and we get into that. You know what to do. We all go shopping on Amazon. Before you go to Amazon, go to VinnieTortorich.com. Click through the banner. It puts a little coal on the fire, gets our train down the track. We're able to keep this show free for all these years. Also, go check out the workouts. We have the brand new workouts out there. Go check them out right now. Where can they find those, Chris? At VinnieTortorich.com and where else?
Sir, VinnieTortorich.com is the best place to find them.
Boom. So go check that out right now, VinnieTortorich.com. You could get the 6-day routine, the 4-day routine, or the 2-day routine. And if you listen next week, we're going to give you clues as to how to use those routines. So on behalf of Chris Shaffer, my name is Vinnie Tortorich. Put life into living, and let's do it with just a little bit more of this Italian